Hello, this is Shmuel Moshe, and you are listening to the Weekly Parashahcast Season 2, the show where I read the Tanakh and provide my own interpretations of what I think it all means. This week's episode falls during the Parashat of Mikeitz in the Torah reading on the 27th of Kislev, 5785, December 28th, 2024. We're going to be starting the book of Shoftim, Judges, chapters 1 through 3 for today's episode. But for those who want to follow along with the weekly Torah portion, you can also visit Season 1 of the Weekly Parashahcast and find the corresponding episode for Parashat Mikeitz. With that being said, let's go ahead and jump on in. As always, I like to remind everybody I'm not a professional Torah scholar, just somebody who wanted to study the Torah and now the Tanakh. Without further ado, let's begin. You can follow along in English on Chabad.org. Shoftim, chapter 1, verse 1. And it was after the death of Joshua that the children of Israel asked of the Lord, saying, Who shall go up for us first against the Canaanites to fight against them? And the Lord said, Judah shall go up. Behold, I have given the land into his hand. And Judah said to Simeon his brother, Come up with me into my lot, and we will fight against the Canaanites, and I will also go with you into your lot. And Simeon went with him. And Judah went up, and the Lord gave the Canaanites and the Perizzites into their hands, and they smote them in Bezek 10,000 men. And they found Adoni-Bezek in Bezek, and fought with him, and they smote the Canaanites and the Perizzites. And Adoni-Bezek fled, and they pursued him, and they caught him and cut off his thumbs and his great toes. And Adoni-Bezek said, 70 kings, having their thumbs and their great toes cut off, gathered food under my table. As I have done, so has God punished me. And they brought him to Jerusalem, and he died there. And the children of Judah fought against Jerusalem and captured it, and smote it with the edge of the sword, and set the city on fire. And afterward the children of Judah went down to fight against the Canaanites, the inhabitants of the mountains of the south and of the lowland. And Judah went to the Canaanites that dwelt in Hebron, now the name of Hebron formerly had been Kiriath Arba, and they smote Sheshai, and Ahiman, and Talmai. And from there he went to the inhabitants of Debir. Now the name of Debir formerly had been Kiriath Sefer. And Caleb said, He that shall smite Kiriath Sefer and capture it, to him will I give Achash my daughter for a wife. And Othniel, the son of Kenaz, Caleb's younger brother, captured it, and he gave him Achash his daughter for a wife. And it was when she came to him that she persuaded him to ask of her father the field, and she learned off the donkey. And Caleb said to her, What is wanting to you? And she said to him, Give me a blessing, for you have given me dry land, and you should give me springs of water. And Caleb gave her the upper springs and the lower springs. And the children of Kenny, the father-in-law of Moses, went up from the city of date palms, with the children of Judah into the wilderness of Judah, which is south of Arad, and he went and dwelt with the people. And Judah went with Simeon his brother, and they smote the Canaanites that inhabited Safed, and they destroyed it, and called the name of the city Hormah. And Judah captured Gaza with its territory, and Ashkelon with its territory, and Ekron with its territory. And the Lord was with Judah, and they drove out the inhabitants of the mountains, but they could not drive out the inhabitants of the valley, for they had iron chariots. And they gave Hebron to Caleb, as Moses had spoken, and he drove out from there the 3 sons of the giant. And the children of Benjamin did not drive out the Jebusites that inhabited Jerusalem, and the Jebusites dwelt with the children of Benjamin in Jerusalem until this day. And the house of Joseph, they also went up to Bethel, and the Lord was with them. And the house of Joseph caused to spy Bethel. Now the name of the city formerly was Luz. And the watchers saw a man leave the city, and they said to him, Show us now the entrance to the city, and we will deal kindly with you. And he showed them the entrance of the city, and they struck the city with the edge of the sword. But the man and his entire family they let go. And the man went to the land of the Hittites, and built a city, and called its name Luz. This is its name until this day. And Manasseh did not drive out the inhabitants of Beth-shean and its towns, Tanach, and its towns, the inhabitants of Dor and its towns, the inhabitants of Libiam, and its towns, the inhabitants of Megiddo, and its towns. And the Canaanites wanted to remain in the land. And it was when Israel became strong that they put the Canaanites to tribute, but they did not drive them out. And Ephraim did not drive out the Canaanites that dwelt in Gezer, and the Canaanites dwelt among them in Gezer. Zebulun did not drive out the inhabitants of Kitron, nor the inhabitants of Nahalol, and the Canaanites dwelt among them and became tributary. Asher did not drive out the inhabitants of Akko, nor the inhabitants of Zidon, nor of Achlab, nor of Achzib, nor of Chelba, nor of Afik, nor of Rehob. And the Asherites dwelt among the Canaanites, the inhabitants of the land, for they did not drive them out. Naphtali did not drive out the inhabitants of Beth Shemesh, nor the inhabitants of Beth Anat, and he dwelt among the Canaanites, the inhabitants of the land. And the inhabitants of Beth Shemesh and of Beth Anat became tributary to them. And the Amorites forced the children of Dan to the mountain, for they would not let them come down to the valley. And the Amorites wanted to remain on Mount Heresh in Ayalon and in the Shalbim, but the hand of the house of Joseph prevailed, and they became tributary. And the border of the Amorites was from Ma'ale Akrabim, from the rock upward. All right, so that's the end of the first chapter. So a quick recap. This seems to be a sort of breakdown of after Joshua passed away. The question became, so who among us is going to go to battle? Who's going to be the first to go march out to war? And the answer came up, Judah. But Judah says, not just us, we're taking the house of Simeon with us. And so these two tribes, Yehuda and Shimon, together, they go and they start fighting. And it looks like they generally have good success. So they take on the Canaanites, the Perizzites, and so on. They smite in Bezek quite a few people. And then they find Adoni-Bezek. So I believe this is their king. Right, and so they find him, they cut off his big toe and his thumbs, and he says, 70 kings having their thumbs and their great toes cut off, gathered food under my table, or it says, gathered under my table, as I have done, so has God punished me. So I believe this is a recap of when Adoni-Bezek was in charge of these people. He would have the thumbs and toes cut off of the kings that were beneath him. So now that he's been captured, the same fate has befallen him. It's very much just a just desserts sort of thing, and he's brought to Jerusalem and dies there, so we can assume he died in captivity, much like you'd see with many other captured kings made into whatever examples they were made into. So it looks like Jerusalem was captured, and they smote it and set it on fire. The Canaanites are also taken out by the Judeans, and so they continue on, and they smite Sheshai, Ahiman, and Talmai, and then so on. They also continue into Kiryat Sefer, and we all heard this promise before, right? Whoever can stop or smite Kiryat Sefer, they get the daughter Achash. So this is a repeat of the dialogue that was in the book of Joshua over who would inherit the land and also get the spring. I do believe this is the same people. And going on from here, we get a repeat of that. Next, the children of Kenny, the father-in-law of Moses. So it says Kenny, but also remember this is Yitro, right? Jethro, Kenny. So it's interesting. He has a few different names, but we know that the father-in-law of Moses is Jethro, right? So his children, they go up from the city of the Date of Palms with the children of Judah, and they dwell there. So they dwell among the Israelites as part of the Judean tribe among them. But on and on, the Judeans march onward with God on their side, and they have no issues, but until they run into the Iron Chariot people, those that are dwelling within, let's see, where is this place here? The inhabitants of the valley. So this is as they're making their campaign in Gaza and Ashkelon, right? They get rid of the people in the mountains, but not in the valley. But Caleb, as was promised through Moses, told that Caleb, the inheritance will be given. They drive out the 3 sons of the giant, and that land is theirs. Now, it also reminds us that the Jebusites were not taken out of the part of Jerusalem that belongs to the Benjamites, so they dwell there. Same thing with the house of Joseph. They're able to go up through Bethel, and their story is of Luz. So if I'm understanding correctly, they spy the city of Luz, they see a man, and they tell him, tell us how to get into the city, and in exchange, we will deal kindly with you. We will deal fairly with you. So this man, he tells them what they want to know, and in exchange, they spare his family. He goes on to found another city called Luz instead. So in other words, he's from the original Luz, then he moves to a city that is the new Luz, and it is founded by him within the land of the Hittites, and it remains Luz to this day. Now, same thing with the tribe of Manasseh, the half-tribe. They did not drive out the inhabitants of Beth Shean, nor Tanakh, or Dor and its towns, Yibleon, Megiddo, and so on. The Canaanites are not budging. They want to stay, and they don't get driven out. Same thing, Zebulun fails to drive out the people of Kitron, Nahalol as well. They become tributaries. Now, again, the instructions were to wipe out certain peoples, but it's also said in the Torah that other than the ones you're commanded to get rid of, the others you may have as tributaries if they surrender to you. So the question is whether or not these were the groups of people that were supposed to be wiped out, which, as we'll see more in a bit, that does prove to be problematic for them. Next up is Asher. Once again, these are the people of Akko, Zidon, Achlab, Agzib or Chalba, and Afik or Rechob. They don't drive them out. They don't get rid of them. Same problem. Naphtali fails to get rid of those in Beth Shemesh, Bet Anat, and they dwell among the Canaanites. The Beth Shemesh and Bet Anat become tributaries. Amorites force the children of Dan to the mountain. They would not let them down into the valley. And they want to remain on Mount Heres in Ayalon, but the hand of the house of Joseph prevails. So in other words, the people of Joseph, they don't let that happen. So then going on from there, the border of the Amorites is from Ma'ale Akrabim, from the rock upward. So you can consider that to be like if there's a specific rock or maybe like a cliff face, that is where the border of that people is. Now we're going to go ahead and move into chapter 2. After just quickly recapping, once again, the takeaway of chapter 1 is we find out that the people of Judah did a pretty good job at taking the land and doing what they were supposed to do. The other tribes kind of don't do 100% of the job. They don't manage to clear out the land, and this will have consequences later. Keep in mind, this is sort of setting the stage. Now, chapter 2 of Judges, verse 1. And a messenger of the Lord went up from Gilgal to Bochim, and said in God's name, I will take you up from Egypt, and I have brought you to the land that I have sworn to your forefathers. And I said, I will not break my covenant with you forever. And you shall not make a covenant with the inhabitants of this land. Their altars you shall smash. But you have not obeyed me. What have you done? And I also said, I will not drive them out from before you, and they will be pokers to you, and their gods will be a stumbling block to you. And it was while the messenger of the Lord was saying these words to all the children of Israel that the nation raised their voices and cried. And they called the name of that place Bochim, and they sacrificed to the Lord there. And Joshua had sent away the nation, and the children of Israel went, each man to his inheritance, to possess the land. And the nation served the Lord during all the days of Joshua, and all the days of the elders that outlived Joshua, and who had all seen the great deed of the Lord that he had performed for Israel. And Joshua the son of Nun, the servant of the Lord, died, being 110 years old. And they buried him within the border of his inheritance in Timnath Heres on the mount of Ephraim, to the north of Mount Gaash. And also all that generation were gathered to their forefathers, and there arose another generation after them, who knew not the Lord, nor the deed which he had done for Israel. And the children of Israel did that which was evil in the eyes of the Lord, and they served the Baalim. And they forsook the God of their forefathers, who had brought them up from the land of Egypt, and they went after other gods, of the gods of the nations that were around them. And they bowed to them, and they provoked the Lord. And they forsook the Lord, and served the Baal and the Ashtaroth. And the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel. And he delivered them into the hands of spoilers, and they spoiled them. And he gave them over into the hands of their enemies around them. And they could no longer stand before their enemies. Wherever they went out, the hand of the Lord was against them for evil. And the Lord had spoken, and as the Lord had sworn to them, and they were greatly distressed. And the Lord raised up judges, and they saved them from the hands of those who had spoiled them. But also their judges they did not obey, for they went astray after the other gods, and they bowed to them. They turned aside quickly from the way wherein their forefathers had walked, obeying the commandments of the Lord, but they did not do so. And when the Lord raised them up judges, then the Lord was with the judge, and saved them from the hand of their enemies all the days of the judge. For the Lord retracted, because of their cry, by reason of them that oppressed them and crushed them. And it was when the judge died that they would return and deal more corruptly than their forefathers, going after other gods to serve them, and to bow down to them. They did not diminish of their practices, nor of their stubborn way. And the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel, and he said, Because this nation has transgressed my covenant which I commanded their forefathers, and have not obeyed me, I too will not continue to drive out any man from before them, of the nations that Joshua left. And he died. In order to test Israel through them, whether they would keep the way of the Lord, to walk therein as their forefathers did, keep it or not. And the Lord left these nations without driving them out hastily, and he did not give them into the hand of Joshua. All right, so once again, that's the end of chapter 2. Let's go over what this all means. So here we get a little bit of a chronology question. What time and place is going on here? So this is in Gilgal to Bochim. So this is while I believe they're in the midst of the great warfare that Joshua is doing his conquest, right? And he says, "No, what did I tell you? I told you that I will take you out of Egypt. And I'll keep this covenant forever. I'll give you the land, but you will not make covenants with the inhabitants of the land, and you're going to destroy their altars. But you have not done that, have you? You did not hold up your end of the deal. What have you done?" And so God said, "I said I would drive them out, and they will be pokers too, or I will not drive them out, and they will be pokers," or thorns was also used in the other translation, right? So because you did not get rid of these people, they are going to be a thorn in your side, and their gods will be a stumbling block to you, meaning they're going to get between your ability to worship me correctly and live righteously, and that's going to cause you problems. So from here, they all get sent off to their respective lands, right? This is all during the time of Joshua, and the job is not done. Joshua dies at 110. He's buried. And then also, as it mentioned in the end of the book of Joshua, that the elders of that generation that outlived Joshua, they also were there. And so while those people were alive, the people of Israel obeyed. But after all of those people died, so after Joshua's generation dies, all of the elderly folk that were the elders who experienced all of the miracles of the Lord of Israel, after this, their children and their children's children stray from the path. And they start worshiping the other gods and follow the ways of these other people. So it says they served Baal and Ashtaroth. Now, we heard before, Baal is another king, another god of the pantheon in the Canaanite region, as I understand it. And then also Ashtaroth is a feminine goddess who is worshipped with trees. And I do find it interesting that the timing, right? I mentioned this episode takes place on the reading for Parashat Mikeitz, which is the 27th of Kislev, or the 28th of December. And so, this actually coincides with Christmas time, right? We're in the midst of Hanukkah as I read this, and I find it so beautiful that I've been having these coincidences where things going on in the real world coincide with what's going on in these portions I've been reading, totally by coincidence. Not by coincidence, there's no such thing, right? So the Ashtaroth, or the Asherim trees, we're not supposed to have these trees, right? These tree altars. Well, Christmas is very much that, right? So I just thought that'd be kind of interesting to point out the whole Christmas thing in relation to worshiping the Asherim trees, or the Ashtaroth, etc. So anyway, they are serving the Canaanite gods and goddesses, and this is not allowed. And so because they're doing this, God is not just no longer standing beside them, he's delivering them into the hands of their enemies. So it used to be that they would be able to fight off whoever they needed to fight off. Now they're on their own. And sometimes, they're not just on their own, God's working against them. And so they'll get defeated and they'll cry out and say, "Oh God, help us, help us." And then God will hear them because he honors his covenant, and he will give them a judge. The judge will be someone who's born that's righteous in their generation, basically. This will be somebody who is like a savior figure, a hero who follows the way of God, and for the sake of the judge, God spares the people. So in other words, all the people in the community, all the Israelites are falling short. They're betraying the covenant. But this one judge, this tzaddik, right, this righteous person, is so righteous. For the sake of this one person, God will help the Israelites. And once that person will die, the people then go back to their old sinful ways, and God has to punish them even more because they're worse than they were last time. Because again, it was for the sake of the one person. So nevertheless, it's a reminder after the judges die, he says, "This nation has transgressed my covenant which I commanded their forefathers and have not obeyed me. I too will continue to drive out any man from before them." Right? "I will not drive them out of those that Joshua did not eliminate." And so this is all part of the test. I'm giving them the opportunity to do the right thing, but they just keep on falling short. So that's the end of chapter 2. As we can see, the people are, once enough generations are removed from the miracles, their ability to maintain a righteous lifestyle following the commandments given through Moses and passed on through the generation of Joshua, they just simply fall short. So now we move on to chapter 3, the last chapter for this week's episode. Chapter 3, verse 1 of Judges. Now these are the nations which the Lord left through whom to test Israel, all those that had not known all the wars of Canaan. Only that the generations of the children of Israel should know, to teach them war, just the earlier ones did not know thereof. The 5 lords of the Philistines, and all the Canaanites, and the Zidonians, and the Hivites that dwelt in Mount Lebanon, from Baal Hermon to the passageway of Hamath. And they were to test through them Israel, to know whether they would obey the commandments of the Lord, which he had commanded their forefathers through Moses. And the children of Israel dwelt among the Canaanites, the Hittites, and the Amorites, and the Perizzites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites. And they took their daughters to themselves for wives, and their own daughters they gave to their sons, and served their gods. And the children of Israel did that which displeased the Lord, and they forgot the Lord their God, and served the Baalim and the Asherot. And the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel, and he gave them over into the hands of the Cushan-Rishathaim, the king of Aram-Naharaim. And the children of Israel served Cushan-Rishathaim 8 years. And the children of Israel cried to the Lord, and the Lord raised up a Savior to the children of Israel, who saved them, Othniel the son of Kenaz, Caleb's brother, who was younger than he. And the Spirit of the Lord came up upon him, and he judged Israel. And he went out to war, and the Lord delivered into his hands Cushan-Rishathaim, and the king of Aram, and his hand prevailed upon Cush-Rishathaim. And the land had rest 40 years. Then Othniel the son of Kenaz died. And the children of Israel continued to do that which displeased the Lord. And the Lord strengthened Eglon the king of Moab against Israel, because they had done that which displeased the Lord. And he gathered to him the children of Ammon and Amalek, and he went and smote Israel, and they possessed the city of the date palms. And the children of Israel served Eglon the king of Moab 18 years. And the children of Israel cried to the Lord, and the Lord raised up for them a Savior, Ehud the son of Gera, the Benjamite, a man who with a shriveled right hand. And the children of Israel sent through him a present to Eglon the king of Moab. And Ehud made for himself a sword which had 2 edges. A cubit was its length, and he girded it under his clothing on his right thigh. And he offered the present to Eglon king of Moab. Now Eglon was a very fat man. And it was when he had finished offering the present that he escorted the people who had carried the present. And he turned back from the quarries that were by Gilgal, and said, I have a secret errand with you, O king. And he said, Be quiet. And all that stood near him went out. And Ehud came to him, and he was sitting by himself in the cool upper room which he had for himself. And Ehud said, I have a message from God to you. And he stood up from the chair. And Ehud stretched out his left hand, and took the sword from his right thigh, and thrust it into his belly. And the haft also went in after the blade, and the fat closed upon the blade, because he did not draw the sword out of his belly. And the excrement came out. And Ehud went out to the porch, and shut the doors of the upper room in front of him, and locked them. Now when he had gone out, his servants came and saw, and behold, the doors of the upper room were locked. And they said, Surely he is covering his feet in the cool room. And they tarried until it was too late. And behold, he did not open the doors of the upper room. And they took the key and opened them. And behold, their lord was fallen down on the earth dead. And Ehud escaped while they lingered, and he passed beyond the quarries and escaped to Seirah. And it was when he came that he blew the trumpet on the mountain of Ephraim. And the children of Israel went down with him from the mountain, and he was before them. And he said to them, Follow me quickly, for the Lord has given your enemies, the Moabites, into your hands. And they went down after him, and seized the fords of the Jordan to Moab, and did not permit any man to pass. And they killed of Moab at that time about 10,000 men, every lusty man and every man of valor, and no man escaped. And Moab was subdued on that day under the hand of Israel, and the land had rest 80 years. And after him was Shamgar the son of Anath, and he killed the Philistines 600 men with an ox goad, and he also saved Israel. End of chapter 3. All right, so now we go into our conclusion. Let's quickly recap. We know the names of the different tribes and people that were left behind to be the tests for Israel. So we see here it's the people of Canaan, or the Philistines, right? So the 5 lords of the Philistines, the Canaanites, the Zidonians, and the Hivites that dwelt in Mount Lebanon, and they were there to test the people. So what happens here? among the Israelites dwell these different peoples, and what starts happening is they start marrying each other, intermarrying, right? So the people are intermarried with the different Canaanite peoples and the Hivites and the Hittites, etc. And not only is this a problem, but it's really a problem because they are led astray to these foreign gods, which is really where the issue is. And it says that they began to serve the Baalim and the Asherot. So that's a big no-no. Now, God's pissed off about this, understandably, and the people of Kushan Ritataim, king of Aram Naharaim, they conquer the Israelites for 8 years, and they cry out to the Lord, and the Lord hears them, and he gives them a judge, which is the Othniel, son of Caleb's brother, right? So this is the guy who judges Israel. In other words, he holds them to account for their sins, and then he liberates them by leading them through battle, and God is with him. For 40 years, they have peace, and then Othniel dies. After this happens, they continue to sin. The next happens where the children of Ammon and Amalek are gathered under Eglon, the king of Moab, against Israel, and they defeat Israel, and they conquer them for 18 years under subjugation. Next up, a man named Ehud, son of Gera from the Benjamin tribe. He's got a shriveled right hand. Now, what I think is really important about this, I want to draw significant attention here. This man from the tribe of Benjamin, Ehud, son of Gera, has a deformity in his right hand, his shriveled right hand. So you can imagine a person whose right hand was not properly formed. It's not, you may have seen people who have a small hand compared to, their other hand, who just cannot use it properly. And so it's important to me to bring up that this man was made the judge, because we see during the book of Leviticus and onward, there are descriptions of who can and cannot be a servant of the Kohanim, right? Among the Levites who may serve in the congregation to assist in the holy sacraments. So people who suffer from physical deformities are excluded from this particular ritual practice and tradition. However, that's only in the case of the Kohanim. Here, we have a totally different scenario. We have a man who is known and detailed that he has a shriveled right hand. In other words, this man's deformity would have disqualified him if he was a Levite or a Cohen from being able to be a priest. He would not have been able to do his job. But that does not disqualify him from being a chosen person, a chosen judge who walks with God with him. So the point of the story here first is that deformities do not disqualify somebody from being chosen by God to fulfill his deeds. The second thing I want to draw attention to is that this entire scheme only works because of the deformity. You see, Ehud keeps a sword or a blade on his right thigh. And this is pretty standard. You keep the blade on your leg, but what's typical is that you wouldn't do that, because if you don't have a functional right hand, you can't draw from the right side. So that's very unusual. But this is why he was allowed to keep his weapon on his hip. Because he had his deformity, basically everybody else underestimated him. So he goes in, and it says that when he strikes on behalf of God and kills the king, he reaches across with his left hand and grabs the blade from his right thigh and then stabs the king and kills him. The only reason this was possible, once again, most people would not be allowed to bring a blade into that room. But because he has the messed up hand, they don't take it away from him. They say, oh, well, he's not a threat. His hand is deformed. He can't draw the sword anyway. So that's the significance here. Oftentimes people will ask questions like, why are people born with deformities? Why do we have people with disabilities? Why is it that people are not born, everybody, in the perfect condition of health? There are times when we cannot understand the grand machinations of what God has planned for each individual. And this story here of Ehud, son of Gera, the Benjamite, is a perfect example of a man whose disability became his ability to bring the weapon in to the throne room and kill this king. Furthermore, his entire strategy here is to leave. It actually reminds me a great deal of the death of Joseph Stalin. So when Ehud kills the king, he stabs him good, and basically his guts spill out, and he just walks away. and he locks the door behind him. And everybody's thinking, oh, well, we won't bother the king because he's getting cool in there. He's enjoying himself. He's living a life of luxury. And also, I think they know better because it says, the idea that they believe it and they say, oh, well, he's probably just cooling off his feet. They know that if they interrupt that, they're probably going to get in trouble. So just like what happened with Joseph Stalin, when Joseph Stalin died at the end of his reign of the Soviet Union, it took like 2 days for anybody to actually discover he was dead. The problem was that he was such a dangerous person that if you interrupted him without being summoned or without permission, he would often put people to death for something like this or some other kind of punishment. So the people that were serving under him, they did not get summoned. And yes, he was in there for a day. Now it's like day 2, and they're like, man, Comrade Stalin has been in there for a long time. We're just going to take the risk and go in. That's exactly what happens here. So because it takes them so long to go in and check on King Eglon, this gives Ehud time to rally the Israelites for war. And from here, they go on a nice killing spree and liberate themselves through him. And so this is how it goes. He blows the trumpet, the shofar, to alert the people it's time to go to war. And they claim the Moabites, they defeat them, and they take control of all the fords from Jordan to Moab. They basically blockade the whole thing, and it says 10,000 men were killed of the Moabites. Now, with that, under the one day, they were subdued that day, and then 80 years of peace after that. Now we get on to the last verse here. Shamgar, son of Anat, he killed the Philistines, 600 men with an ox goad, and he also saved Israel. Not as much detail there, but again, the significance. What is an ox goad? I mean, is this the tool? Is this a weapon? The idea is it was a miraculous thing. One man killed 600 Philistines by himself with like a tool. That is pretty significant. So, another miracle among the people Israel. And this is, of course, how God manifests his miracles before them so that they all can understand his power and remember that which he has done for Israel time and time again. Well, that's it for this week's portion. Thank you for listening. It's been interesting to jump into the book of Judges as it sort of has a unique chronology catching up to the stuff before and then after the book of Joshua. But now we have a pretty good idea of where we are. We are now in the time period following, and I think it's going to continue chronologically in this fashion for a while. But until then, I hope you found that all very interesting. We'll be tuning in next time, hopefully, to tune in with chapters 4 through 6 of the book of Judges. And until then, this has been Shmuel Moshe with the Weekly Parashahcast Season 2, saying thank you for listening, and I hope to see you next time. Until then, Baruch Hashem.